Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to BGTV. And today I want to talk about a story regarding capitalism. And this came about because I'm reading right now an Andrew Carnegie biography. I have it up there on my bookshelf, somewhere around there. But basically, it's the one where it's him in the suit and the little top hat and whatnot. But the reason why I'm so interested is because one, at one point he became the richest man on the face of the planet, and two, one of my mentors is this gentleman by the name of Ben Gay III, who is the last living protege of Dr. Napoleon Hill, who, according to the story, Dr. Napoleon Hill was the protege of Andrew Carnegie. So wanted to learn a lot about that. Like that lineage of mentors is really interesting to me. And so I wanted to really dig in there. And so one of the stories that I remembered from the book was Andrew Carnegie's first real investment and his first taste of capitalism. There's some things that we can draw from that. But as the story goes, he was at the time working as a personal assistant, like a secretary to, and also a telegraph operator for Thomas Scott of the Pennsylvania Railroad. And keep in mind, Carnegie had worked his way up from being an extremely poor Scottish immigrant to the point where he was working in factories when he was like 12 or 13, worked his way up, and then eventually got into the good graces of Thomas Scott. And Scott let Carnegie invest beside him in this business that was supplying like a contractor of the Pennsylvania Railroad. So it was a great investment that Carnegie only could have gotten access to through his relationship with Scott. So he did it, and he literally had to mortgage he and his mother's house at the time in order to make the investment. And they put up $500. And when they did that, Carnegie started to get every month a check for a dividend check for, a dividend, however it was paid out, for $10. And keep in mind, this is back way, 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 way back in the like 1860s or a little bit before that. So this money was a lot more significant at the time. And not only is that a 24% annualized return, which is really, really good if you study investing and investments. And, you think about, people say, well, the average of the stock market over time is between a 7 to 10% return. And this is a guaranteed weekly or monthly dividend that equates out to about a 24% annualized return. It's a great investment. At the time, he was making from this investment $10 a month in dividends. And his main job was paying him like $40 a month in dividends. So just to put that in perspective, this was huge for him. And when he got that first check, it really just turned his eyes on to the power of capitalism and having your money work for you. He then went on to make a bunch of other investments, and the rest is history from there. He actually went from investing in this side project to then getting into like a railroad car business, and then a couple other different businesses that he found. And when he really struck it big was he invested in an oil business when it was really early on in the oil days. And then obviously got into iron and then steel and then Carnegie Steel and so on and so forth. But that first round of investing in the dividends is really where he set himself apart, and really where he got to a point where he was making the equivalent of millions of dollars in dividends when he was like 30 years old. And so that was a big step up for him in his career. But there were three main takeaways that I wanted to highlight from that particular story. And those three, I have I wrote a little blog post on it. And so I want to make sure that I'm sticking to the wording from that previous post that I wrote. But here are the three. The first one is, wherever you are now does not determine where you're going to end up. And this makes a lot of sense if you think about it. Just because you start somewhere does not mean you have to end in that place. Now, there's a lot of friction to change your situation. There is a tremendous correlation between where a lot of people start and where they end up, but that does not mean that you have to follow suit with that. Just because you're currently in a situation that you don't really like, or you're not getting paid very much, or you don't have that many skills, that does not mean that you have to stay forever locked into that situation that you're in. My grandfather, and I go more into it in the post. But my grandfather was a just an incredible rags to riches story, or an example of somebody who had a rags to riches story. And he at one point was his parents were dirt poor immigrants that came over to the United States in the early 1900s. He had to put himself through school, so on and so forth. He went from being absolute dirt poor, no money, and this very, very poor first generation American, to at the end of his life, he was a respected judge. And he took himself to the next level of where he wanted to go. He went from a social worker to becoming an attorney. At 28 years old, he went back to law school at night while he was still working as a social worker to put food on the table for his 5 children. Okay. It can be done. It absolutely can be done. And there are so many stories out there of people who are changing their life, who do change their life. And there's not one path to get there. But the resounding theme is that just because you're somewhere right now does not mean that you have to end up there. You can definitely change your situation. And there are a lot of ways to do it. I might suggest finding a couple of role models who, and we all have access to the internet, even if you have to walk to a library or to some public building to be able to use the internet to go research things like that. You have to do it. You got to just do what it takes to get there. So I would suggest looking at a couple of role models, seeing how they did what they did, and emulating that as much as you possibly can to be able to get to where they are and where you want to go. Now, the second one is that doing great work with and for the right people can be an absolute game changer. That one's pretty easy to understand. Like, your net worth is your network, or your network is your net worth, whatever the phraseology of that is. The more people that you know, the more access that you have, the better things that you can get into, things you can get into nobody else can get into. For example, Andrew Carnegie was able to get into that investment because he knew Thomas Scott. There was no other way he was going to get into that. He had no connections, nothing. But he was able to get into that situation because he did really, really good work for his local telegraph company. And he impressed Thomas Scott to the point where Scott wanted him to come and be his personal assistant and secretary, and then started to trust him. And then they went into business together and they did all these things and so on and so forth. But Carnegie did really good work, and he made sure to show that really good work to the right people. And he just moved up in life, and he just kept moving up in station, and eventually he was able to work for himself, and he made a lot of really good decisions. Third is that the goal of a capitalist should be to have your capital work for you, not the other way around. This is basically the bread and butter of what people talk about when they talk about passive income. Carnegie put his money into made an investment, and it started to pay him dividends that did not depend on him actually having to go out and work for it. When you're sleeping and you're able to make money from your investments, that's the dream, at least for me. The dream for me is to have, like, you can do absolutely nothing all day, and you have enough money coming in from your investments to where not only can you reinvest and be growing your principal, but also you have enough to pay for all of your life expenses, including the niceties of life. So the going out to eat, the vacations, doing whatever you want to do. And so that to me is the absolute freedom, is to be able to do what you want, whenever you want to do it, with whoever you want to do it with, wherever you want to do it, and for however long you want to do it for. And to have all of those things be checked, those boxes be checked using income from your investments. So not money that you have to go and work for. Like, you don't have to go do a sales call to make a sale to pay for a thing, but that you have money invested that is generating enough cash to be able to allow you to do all those things, and to not be reliant on a paycheck or somebody else saying you can and cannot do something. That to me is the ultimate freedom. And that is personally what I'm working towards in my life. I'm not there, but I'm working towards it. I will get there one day. I refuse to not get there. And I think it's a worthy goal of everybody, because at that point, you're really able to break through to a point where you're just not dependent on anybody else for your money and for the ability to say, I want to do nothing today, or I want to do this today. And I'm not there yet, but I would encourage everybody to go on the journey of becoming the person who can get there and who can be the person that is able to do those sorts of things. I think that's a worthwhile journey and a noble pursuit. So those were three lessons that I took away from that little anecdote. I've been reading a lot. Like I said, been reading that biography a lot, spending a lot of time outside walking and listening to the audiobook. And it's just fascinating. And I love to learn from really smart people. My grandfather always used to say, I may not be brilliant, but I like to read a lot about what brilliant people have to say. So I like to emulate him. I think he was brilliant. He was just being humble. But I like to read a lot of what brilliant people have to say too. Want to learn from them, apply that to my own life. So I wanted to share that with you all. So hopefully you got to take something from that and embrace your inner capitalist. It's not a bad word. It's a great word. It's done a lot of great and good in the world. And if we all can learn a little bit more about that and learn from these really successful people, we don't have to emulate them completely, but there are things we can learn from everybody. I fundamentally believe that. So with that being said, I hope you have a great day and I will see you on the next episode. Take care.